Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Muslims Uncensored with me, the mighty Muslim Robert Carter, who I'm sure you've all missed dearly over the past few weeks. Oh, and of course Roshan is here as well for any of you who care to to see him again. Well, assalamu alaikum, Roshan. It's good to be back. It's 2025. This is our first show since returning and there's a ton of things to discuss. Just to clarify, we've taken a short break from the show for various reasons. I know this has been probably heartbreaking for our loyal viewers who are in their huge numbers, but there was a reason for it. I think we needed a little bit of a rest, but also we've been preparing the ground for improvements here at the show and in Five Pillars in general. Do you want to just mention anything?
No,
ahead?
not really. But
I know obviously.
let's let it be a surprise. No, I mean we're going to have a new set eventually, and just kind of spruce the show up a little bit, make it more of a professional podcast. I'm not saying it's not professional now, but a little bit more, a few more bells and whistles on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna hoover the floors and whatnot, and actually get it looking a bit more spruced up. But Ramadan as well is also around the corner, so of course there's always a lot of prep work involved in our coverage there. So, but alhamdulillah, we're back, and there is a lot to discuss. The first, of course, is the Gaza ceasefire, which is imminent. It could be agreed literally whilst we're recording this. And it's as simple as that. So I'm going to keep an eye on the news. But obviously it's been well over a year of the genocide in Gaza. Lots happened. The whole region has basically been involved in it in one way or another, directly fighting or otherwise. So obviously this has traumatized, I think, the whole planet as well. It's a massive, massive thing. But just tell me about the details of the deal, what we know so far. So there's going to be a prisoner exchange, I think, with the hostages that are also held. And I'm not sure about the territorial situation. I think Israel's going to pull back, but there'll be some kind of buffer zone, whatever that means.
I mean, we don't know the complete details, and by the end of today we might do, but the general outline is that Hamas will release all the remaining Israeli prisoners, which I think maybe about 100 or 150, in return, in a phase kind of process. And in return, Israel will release about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. They'll also withdraw from most of the Gaza Strip, including the Philadelphia corridor between Gaza and Egypt. But I think they will maintain some kind of presence in the north, some kind of buffer zone in the north. Those seem to be the general outline of the details, but we don't know exactly.
Yeah, well, either way, it looks like the deal is about to happen. And there have been, according to reports, there have been several attempts that have come pretty close, but have all failed throughout the year and over of fighting for one reason or another. But it seems like the element that's changed here, that's really affected the situation, is Trump's pending arrival to power in the White House. According to reports and reading between the lines, it looks like he's basically made this deal happen. That's what it looks like on both sides. He's used very threatening rhetoric towards the region. He's basically said if the hostages aren't released, he's going to, I think all hell in the region will break out, something like that. Some very cryptic messaging there that could imply anything. But also I think with the Israeli regime as well, he sent his envoys there, and after talking to Netanyahu, a breakthrough was made. You can take from that what you will, but I think that this, I think Trump has basically told all sides, like, let's get a deal. You know, he's a deal breaker. That's what it appears to happen.
I mean, obviously, I think Biden would obviously want the deal to happen before he leaves the White House in about a week's time, simply because he can take credit for it. Now, if Netanyahu is really spiteful, and he's got no reason to be spiteful to Biden, because Biden's basically, bankrolled his war, and supplied him with all these weapons. They're complete partners in this genocide. But if he was spiteful and he wanted to kind of send a message out to Trump, he could sign the deal a day after Trump comes into office. That happened, I don't know whether you remember, you're too young to remember, but that happened in Iran in the late 70s when the American hostages, basically Ayatollah Khomeini, I think, waited until Reagan.
So Jimmy Carter went out, Reagan came in.
He waited till Reagan got in. So let's see if the same happens. So I don't know. Everyone's been saying this deal is going to be signed yesterday, today, tomorrow. But who knows? It might happen a day after Biden leaves the White House, Trump comes in. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But I know already a lot of people are saying that this basically is something that Trump brought about. But obviously we shouldn't make the mistake of saying that Trump's some kind of peacemaker in the region, because he might have ended the direct fighting right now for his own PR image, but in the long run, I mean, he's pushing normalization.
Yeah.
He's no friend of the Palestinian cause whatsoever. So we shouldn't give him any credit in that regard. But what about the future? I mean, where do we go from here? Gaza's been devastated. But I think Israel has also suffered quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, this is a two-way deal. Of course, the Palestinians want a ceasefire to end the suffering in Gaza. But the Israelis want a ceasefire as well, because their economy is destroyed, you know, and they can't sustain this. They're a small country, limited resources in manpower and everything else. This is hurting them as well. They want a ceasefire as well. And of course, the hostages is an obsession in Israel as well. They want the hostages released. That seems to be a sore point for them.
Do you know what? It's sorry to cut you off, but a lot of Israelis actually don't want a ceasefire.
All right.
So I know many do, because of the damage it's done or whatever. But there are actually a lot of crazies in Israel. They actually want to keep the war going for one reason or another. Ben Gvir, the extremist politician, has actually basically called it a surrender deal to Hamas. Feels totally betrayed by the fact that this deal's come about and it's been accepted, it seems, almost. And he's threatening to resign from government as a result of the deal.
Which could affect the coalition.
Which could affect the
Maybe
coalition.
That's why there's a delay in Israel signing.
Could be.
Yeah,
could
because Netanyahu's thinking about his eternal political situation because if his coalition falls and his government falls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think just to, sorry to contradict your point there, but there are, let's make no mistake here, there are many Israelis, they have no issue with the genocide. They don't even recognize it as genocide. They want to continue doing what Israel's been doing, which is
on the other
massacring
side
kids.
as well, there are elements, I'm sure, within Hamas and other fighting on the ground that don't want a ceasefire either because they're hurting Israel. I mean, Hamas is still very, very operational. They killed several Israeli soldiers just the other day. They're not a defeated force at all. And I think that brings us on to kind of, I mean, we're talking a little bit of, because the deal hasn't been signed yet and we're doing the podcast now, we're going to have to talk as if it's been signed to a certain extent. And what I would say, if I'm going to do a post-mortem on the whole situation, is three essential points to take away. One is that Hamas has not been defeated. You know, that was a military objective of Israel, and all they did was kill lots of civilians, probably well over 100,000, destroy lots of civilian infrastructure, expose their ugly, genocidal, you know, baby-killing face to the whole world. But they have not defeated Hamas. Even yesterday, Blinken said, the American Secretary of State said that Hamas has probably recruited as many soldiers as it's lost. So that in itself, Hamas is very, very operational. While Hezbollah may have surrendered, you know, and Iran has taken a back seat and is not attacking Israel, you know, directly, Hamas is still very, very operational, inflicting huge damage on Israeli troops in blood and treasure and morale. The Houthis are still operational as well. So, you know, we have to look at it in the round. And the final thing I would say, Robert, is that, you know, even if a deal is signed, Israel has earned the undying enmity, hatred in the hearts of every pro-Palestinian, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, for the rest of our lives. We are now completely opposed, not just to, you know, Israeli hegemony over Gaza and the West Bank, but the existence of Israel itself as a Zionist apartheid entity. We want to see the end of Zionism, and I pledge personally to work towards that for the rest of my life, however many years I have left, or days or weeks or whatever I have left. And I'm sure you do as well. And every Muslim around the world does. And not only Muslims, but non-Muslims. So this ain't over. This ain't over. You know, you may have killed 100,000 people, but this ain't over, because we will just regroup and we will come back, you know, because our goal is the end of Zionism, the end of this apartheid, disgusting entity, this cancer in the Middle East. And we will not, until our dying breath and our children's dying breath and our grandchildren's, however long it takes, we're going to work towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it time, he will make it time to liberate Palestine as well. So I have no doubts that the day will come. We're just waiting for Allah to make it happen. He's testing us in the meantime. But what I think you've mentioned, which I think is a really important point that we have to emphasize as well, is the military failures of Israel in Gaza. Like, it's almost total. I can't think of a single original military objective that's been achieved. They didn't get all their hostages back. They actually killed a few of them in the meantime. They haven't defeated Hamas in the slightest. Hamas is still fighting even now, and the Israelis are getting killed in Gaza even now, IDF soldiers or whatever. They haven't achieved anything. The only thing that they've achieved, which I guess from a Zionist point of view is actually a win, is they just killed a bunch of innocent Palestinians.
Kill children.
That's what Israel ultimately is all about. It's about killing and genociding and land theft. So, I just think that that's a really, really important point, because we always talk about Israel as if they're undefeatable and it's the greatest army in the world. Well, actually, they can't even defeat Hamas in Gaza with all of the limitations that Hamas has. I mean, Israel has air superiority, far greater technology, all the arms and support from the West, like unconditional. You're killing kids, don't worry about it, we'll keep supporting you. And they still couldn't defeat Hamas. I mean, there are serious limitations.
And their intelligence capabilities in Gaza were very limited as well.
Yeah,
now,
really
obviously, they infiltrated Hezbollah and Iran very well, in fact. But they didn't. I mean, Gaza's right next door to Israel. And they took a year to kill Sinwar, and they only came across Sinwar by chance, by the way, not because of intelligence.
Because he was fighting on the front lines. They didn't see October the 7th happening. I know there's conspiracy theories around that, but it seems like that it was an intelligence failure, if you're going to take it at face value. A massive intelligence failure. So basically, Israel is just, it's a failure in its own right militarily. So I think that's just something to note.
And it's discredited in the eyes of the world. Only it's absolutely discredited in the eyes of the world as an apartheid, racist, genocidal state. In the eyes of every person with any humanity in the world. I'm not just talking about Muslims here, but non-Muslims as well. And it's only the evildoers ultimately, and that's what they are. The people with black hearts, the racists, the Islamophobes, the warmongers, the genociders of the world that still have any empathy with Israel whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there is another story bringing us back over here to the UK, where there have been some major developments. We'll just tackle this one first of all. I think we can get through it pretty easily. A Labour Treasury Minister, Tulip Siddiq, has resigned after growing pressure over an anti-corruption investigation involving her links to the former regime ruling over Bangladesh. Perhaps you want to go into a bit more detail here. So Tulip is related to Sheikh Hasina, who has now been removed. She was basically an Indian puppet, a puppet of the Indian state in Bangladeshi politics. She was removed through a popular revolution, mostly led by students. And there's also been some corruption allegations which have forced her into resigning from government. So perhaps you want to dissect it a little bit more.
Yeah, so Tulip Siddiq is the niece of the deposed Bangladeshi dictator Sheikh Hasina, who's now fled to India. And now, basically, she has had access to 6 properties in London. Now, we all know what a London property is worth. Even a small flat is worth nearly $500,000 or something like that. It's crazy. So most of us Londoners are basically living in hovels, where she's had access to 6 properties, some of which she owned and some of which belonged to her mother, who's Sheikh Hasina's sister, and other members of the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina's party. And she's either lived with them, not maybe paying rent or rent free, but she's the anti-corruption minister. And Sheikh Hasina is basically accused of corruption in Bangladesh for embezzling billions of pounds. And also, Tulip Siddiq has been named in corruption investigations in Bangladesh.
Wow.
So to be a anti-corruption minister in the Labour government while facing these corruption allegations, I mean, surely it's untenable. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy how Keir Starmer took so long to say. He didn't even sack her. She resigned, Yeah. But it's obvious to every average person. You can see there's a conflict of interest here. Now, even if she's completely innocent of all these allegations, the fact that these allegations remain and they need to be investigated, and she can't be the anti-corruption minister while these allegations are in play. And it shows incredibly poor judgment from Keir Starmer that it's taken him so long to see the obvious that everyone else could see. Now, Tulip Siddiq has real questions to answer, and she's very good at blocking people, including me and Five Pillars and Dilly on Twitter. But she doesn't like answering questions. She says she's completely innocent. She didn't know what was going on, or that none of these houses I stayed in were the result of any impropriety. Everything was legal, etc. But the fact is, this needs to be investigated. I personally think that the Bangladeshi government need to put in an extradition request. And I'm not sure if she's a Bangladeshi national or not, or just a British national, but I think they need to put an extradition request to the British government to extradite her to Bangladesh. No one else is talking about this, apart from me, apparently. Sorry, I'm trying to take credit for this idea, but I really think it's the obvious conclusion. There's a serious corruption allegation against her. She needs to stand trial in a Bangladeshi court. And if she's found innocent, she can leave. If she's found guilty, then she has to pay the price. That's what I think, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair thing. Like you said, she denies any wrongdoing. Okay, fine. If you haven't done anything wrong, go and answer, especially in Bangladesh, a country which I'm sure on another day she would talk up and praise and say, well, this is a great country which her family originates from. Okay, well, there's some serious allegations against you there, so maybe you should go and answer and deal with that in a court of law in Bangladesh as well. I think there was an investigation here that was concluded. It didn't find any wrongdoing, but
it's
at the same time,
it's a Labour Party investigation, basically. I mean, I think allegedly it's independent, but we all know it's a British investigation.
And I think I did watch a report. I think it was a Channel 4 report. They did mention that the investigation didn't get a chance to look everywhere it wanted to, something like that.
It's a very quick investigation. I mean,
very quick.
This is something that would normally take months to get to the bottom of, right?
A lot of
this was done like in a week. Come on,
it's a lot of unanswered questions. And I think that there's a bit of like I don't know, like cronyism in Starmer's Labour Party, I think, because I think he basically, in response to her resignation, he basically said, well, we leave the door open
to her coming back.
Possibly, it was open to interpretation.
I mean, she's Keir Starmer's mate, basically. They're friends.
Exactly,
they're personal friends.
Exactly, personal friends.
So
she's been criticised.
She should resign as an MP. I think she should resign as an MP while these allegations are hanging over her. I don't see how she can fulfil her government duties or her duties as an MP. Quite frankly, she just needs to get rid of these allegations first. And if she's found innocent, she can come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's that story which is developing, and I think you're cool. Let's see how it's received. Perhaps our audience in Bangladesh might see your suggestion, and let's see where it goes from there. It'd be interesting to see if that went somewhere. Well, there is another story which I think is more pressing, in fact, very concerning. It's the rise of right-wing party Reform UK. According to recent polling, it's almost neck and neck with the current party of power.
Before you get into this, do you remember when we went to Rochdale about a year ago, a bit less than a year ago, and Reform UK were campaigning there, and they were an absolute joke.
Yeah.
And we called them out as being an absolute joke, and we weren't taking them seriously. Well, we were kind of wrong, weren't we? Because a year on, they're polling neck and neck with Labour.
Yes, I know. That's the thing. Well, I think obviously polling doesn't always come to fruition in the way that it's polled. So things could change. But they're obviously quite a populist thing, like Nigel Farage and these types of characters. They're populist. And so, they can pounce on things which mainstream parties can't always pounce on. And what they're pouncing on right now is right-wing sentiment in the British public.
They are a mainstream party now, Robert.
Well,
they're in Parliament. They're a mainstream party.
They are. Yeah. But obviously they're on the fringes, a minority party. They could potentially break the system, which is monopolised mostly by the Labour Party and the Conservatives. And it's because they're benefiting from the right-wing sentiment of stories which are being pushed, like the grooming gang scandal, anti-immigration sentiment. This comes off of the back of, there's an attempt to normalise and mainstream Tommy Robinson right now. So they're kind of benefiting.
Although they have distanced themselves from Tommy Robinson.
They have, absolutely. But I think the mood now is we need a new right-wing force in Britain. Yeah. That's what's being pushed.
The thing is that they're not
foreign billionaires like Elon Musk getting involved and really pushing this. Potentially he's even going to finance He's going to put money into British politics as well to get the ball rolling. That's what's being speculated. So, we live in quite alarming times. But the main reason is not because of anti-immigration politics, which has been around in Britain for a while, but this party is actually criticising Muslims and going after Islam in some cases, in ways that other parties normally are a bit shy to do, or don't tend to go into that type of rhetoric.
Let's call a spade a spade. I think if you ask most Muslims, do you think Reform UK is an Islamophobic party? The answer would be yes. It would be like 99% would say yes. I mean, they're not blatantly Islamophobic like Tommy Robinson is, for example, but they get really close to the line, and they'll question. They have an obsessive focus, like GB News. They have this obsessive focus on stories related to Muslims. So Richard Tice will talk about Sharia courts, for example, and he'll do it in a way which isn't blatantly Islamophobic, but obviously he's questioning Sharia courts, which is Sharia is part of Islam. He's putting the focus on it. And then the supporters, like Nigel Farage, he did a tweet. I'm not sure whether you can put this up. There was basically yesterday, there was a British citizenship ceremony. And the Lord Mayor of Brighton is a Muslim, and he said Salam Alaikum in the ceremony. And Nigel Farage said something like, "This is trashing everything that is sacred to Britain," or something like that. So obviously that tweet in itself is close to the line, but he could probably argue that it's not Islamophobic. But just look at the replies underneath and the quote tweets. All his supporters are like, "Yeah, Muslims out," and this and that, and like, so they know what they're doing. You know, they're pushing it as far as like Anjem Choudhury. Remember Anjem Choudhury? Like, he pushed it as far as he could push it. You know, without crossing the line into illegality. But then all his supporters went into the line of supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda and whatever. And I think Reform UK are doing that. They're kind of, it's dog whistle stuff. And then all their supporters run around, because their supporters are basically Tommy Robinson supporters. And a lot of their supporters are racist and Islamophobe.
Well, Tommy Robinson
that's their constituency.
Tommy Robinson himself has actually expressed support for Reform UK in the past. I think he actually backed them in the general election. Yes. He actually urged people to vote for them, even though they do distance themselves from him. And again, like the far right anti-Muslim riots that we saw in the summer last year, which were literally mobs of white men going out and trying to attack mosques and beating up people who appeared to be Muslim and foreign, and immigrant hotels and all the rest of it. Again, Nigel Farage totally rubbished any of these claims, but people were calling them like the Farage riots and stuff like that. Yeah. And again, it was because of rhetoric he's used and comments he's made about Muslims and immigrants that he's been accused of all of this. So, you know, I think the fact that this party might actually, I mean, we've always dealt with this in Britain, this type of rhetoric and anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim type of stuff, but it's normally been on political fringes or on the streets.
Now it's very mainstream.
Now it's very mainstream, and I mean, Farage could become prime minister. I think he could become prime minister.
What you're right. I mean, the latest polls say they are on 32%, and Labour's on 33%, and Conservatives are like 25.
One behind. One point behind.
So because of the way our electoral system works, that percentage share wouldn't translate into a percentage share of seats in Parliament. However, they would probably get maybe I don't know, 80 to 100 seats, which is still very, very significant. What could happen is they could do a deal with the Conservatives, some kind of merger deal or whatever. And if that happened, then they would sweep the next general election. They would beat Labour easily. Now, obviously, there's a bit of a needle between the two parties, so that's not a foregone conclusion. But in terms of the right-wing vote in this country, it's significant, and it's probably a majority. You know, it's probably a majority. And I think we have to just not kid ourselves. Yeah, we do have allies in this country. We do have decent people in this country who don't hate Muslims, who aren't racist. But we have a lot of people who are exactly that as well. And that is just the nature of what Britain is.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've got to watch out for this. I think the last general election, the Muslim vote mobilized for Gaza. That was the one key issue. Okay, now that there's possibly going to be a ceasefire, the Gaza issue, you know, people move on, unfortunately, even though they shouldn't, they're going to move on. The next general election, I think Muslims have got to be prepared to stand up to this. This is a massive effort by the right wing to, this is the Islamophobia industry mobilizing to politically take down the Muslim vote, in my opinion. I literally think it's that. I think that the success that the Muslim vote has had over the Gaza issue and the impact that the pro-Palestine cause has had in the West has convinced the Islamophobia industry that we now have to politically crush this whilst it's a baby in the cradle. We have to smother this baby in the cradle. So the Muslim vote, I'm not aiming this at the campaign per se, but just the Muslims, general Muslims, we need to stand up for this. We need to be prepared. We need to mobilize again, and we need to keep this momentum going. Because we now need strong voices to defend us here.
But we must do that without compromising our values. You know.
Yeah, we need strong voices.
I don't believe. I'm going to get onto the Workers' Party in a minute. Segue into this because I think it's relevant.
Yeah, we need options.
But now. I think what you just said, some Muslims will use that. Oh, we're facing this Islamophobic onslaught. We have to have as wide a coalition as possible of Muslims and non-Muslims. But that is the path which leads down to basically compromising our values. And we can never do that. Even if life becomes uncomfortable in this country, we can never abandon our values. And it has become uncomfortable. But who says that, you know, the purpose of dunya is not to be comfortable, have a big house and a big car and have no problems in life whatsoever. Life is a struggle. Dunya is a struggle. It's a test, brothers and sisters. And our ultimate goal is to get into Jannah. So I have no problem actually with life becoming uncomfortable for Muslims in this country. In a way, I think it should be, because once it becomes too comfortable, that's when we lose our values. That's what's happened to American Muslims, Robert. You've been to America. They're richer than we are, more comfortable. They have bigger houses, bigger cars, and more money than we have. But look what path they've gone down. They've gone down to the path of normalizing LGBT, you know, and all kinds of fahisha, quite frankly. So we can never go down that path. And our ultimate goal is to remain steadfast to our religion and to worship our Creator wherever we are in the world, no matter how life becomes difficult. So this segues into the Workers' Party. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, just before that, I think this is a really important point, because I want people to get ready for what's coming up politically in this country. What we need to do, I think, is, now that Islam is being attacked and the Muslim community is under attack, an Islamophobia industry is trying to convince the masses, the non-Muslim masses, that grooming is an Islamic problem and that Pakistanis are really dangerous.
Outrageous.
They're all trying to groom your white kids and all that type of stuff. They're trying to normalize that in the minds of people. What we've got to do is not be apologetic, not use weasel words or try to find common ground with this narrative and, you know, trying to link hands with our enemies here. We have to lock horns, and we have to turn around and say, and not be apologetic and say, well, you know, all Muslims should condemn this. No. Islam doesn't condone this. You give us the chance to deal with these criminals in the Islamic way, we will do much better than you. And actually, if this country was Islamic, like, for example, many Muslim countries, these types of crimes wouldn't even exist. So
they'd be dead. It would be capital punishment.
They'd be gone. Do you know what I mean? We deal with these people. We don't even allow non-mahram men to touch, or in an ideal scenario, even to look at the women. We believe in segregation, in teaching kids don't even think about going out and hanging out with the opposite gender.
Boyfriend, girlfriend,
we don't even do that. So the fact is that there's an education issue here. There is, we have to be confident in ourselves to know that our belief system is the right way, okay? And we can't let the enemies of Islam normalize this. We have to come back fighting, not apologizing. Do you know what I mean? That's why all these white men in the media are saying, where's all the Muslim imams? Why are they not apologizing for grooming? Do you know what I mean? And they're linking it. Well, first of all, they have been. You just ignore those headlines. But second of all, why should some imam who lives a good, honourable life have to apologise for the grooming of some scumbag, especially when you're not going to let Muslims deal with criminals in our community? Do you know what I mean? It was this non-Muslim state that allowed this scandal to go ahead. Okay, so they're attacking Labour on this. Labour's not a Muslim party. I know they try to spin it that way sometimes, but Labour ain't no Muslim party. That is a non-Muslim party, mostly white people. Do you know what I mean? They're the ones who allowed it. If you let Muslims from the community deal with it, we're going to deal with it totally. We're going to totally deal with this. So yeah, this is
what also the stats doesn't.
We need to fight back. We need to fight back.
The stats don't back their argument up as well, because the police. I mean, there is some statistics missing from this whole, and there needs to be more, kind of statistics to actually get to the bottom of this. But the statistics we have from the police, etc., say that 85% or more of groomers are white.
Yeah.
And when we look at the disproportionality of it, even if you look at it compared to the proportion of the population, 85% white, 6% Pakistani, it's something like 6% Pakistani are groomers. What's happened is that there are a few very high-profile cases in Rothschild, Rotherham, Telford, other places, where the media has fixated on these cases and given the impression to everybody that all groomers are Pakistani, or it's disproportionate, when in fact it isn't. Now, of course, we have criminals who call themselves Muslims, who come from Muslim communities, but they're just criminals. They're degenerates, just like every community has degenerates and criminals. Why blame the whole community for it? And especially when Islam is completely against this kind of rubbish. And obviously this guy is obviously giving publicity to grooming as an Islamic crime.
Exactly. So we'll segue into this because I think it's natural to do so. Andrew Tate, I don't know what to call him. He's a social media guy, isn't he? He's just like a guy in Romania.
Just a social media loudmouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever he is, an influencer. I don't know what you want to call him.
Made his money basically on girls, webcam porn girls.
So-called top G. He's basically sparked massive controversy among Muslims who have been slamming him on X because of outrageous tweets that he's issued about this issue, the grooming gang thing. He's tweeted calling it an Islamic crime more than once, I think, and he's used those words in bold.
So he's linked it to Islam.
He said that this is a problem that Muslims have to confess to and then deal with, or else Christian Islamophobes are going to keep hating on Islam. So until you deal with this Islamic crime as Muslims, Christians have basically a right to hate on Islam, basically. He was slammed, dunked by everyone, left, right and centre, and he's been blocking them all. Everyone. He blocked me and Five Pillars and you way before. So he's blocked us for past criticism. We've been criticising him for a while, to be fair. But he's been blocking everyone, Hakikachu and all the other ex-Muslims, people who platformed him in the past. He's been blocking them now. It's an absolute disgrace. He actually came out, I'll give you a chance to respond to this and then I'll play out the video. He actually responded in a video why he's blocking Muslims. And again, he just doubled down. He doubled down. He didn't even see.
He's a very arrogant man.
Arrogant man. I mean, what was your reaction to it? Because I know you've been tweeting about the Tate thing.
I just think, we had an article by Maria Akbar on the website this week. I encourage brothers and sisters to read it if you haven't already done so. How he's been such a huge disappointment since he entered Islam. Obviously, our position on Five Pillars is that we welcomed him into Islam, which was the correct Islamic position. We knew about his past. We knew about his problematic statements. We didn't try to deny that. But as a new Muslim, we felt that we should give him a chance. And we probably gave him a chance for about 6 months, right? Or a bit more than that. And then we started to call him out because he wasn't changing his ways. He was promoting vile stuff on his publicly vile stuff, promoting a very un-Islamic lifestyle, clearly not listening to the Muslims that he had in his circle, if he does have any. And it just became untenable. So obviously we started to call him out quite early, I think. And he just got to the point where 6 months ago he was basically part of the riot instigation, where he was
very close to Tommy Robinson, isn't he?
So he was calling, he was blaming. Didn't he say that killer in Southport was an immigrant and a Muslim or something like that?
Something like that. He shared an image which we condemned at the time. That might have been why he blocked you, actually. It was a brown-looking guy in a boat with a knife.
Yeah, absolutely demonizing immigrants and portraying them as something which they're not. And now he's linking Islam to grooming. I mean, it's gone beyond the pale. He's obviously not listening to what people are saying. He's a very arrogant man. He thinks he's going to be Prime Minister of Britain. He's living in some cloud cuckoo land, completely delusional. Absolutely. I mean, he's in Romania under house arrest, or country arrest at least. He can't leave the country, right? I think I'm right in saying that.
I think there's been an update there.
There's charges against him.
He was under house arrest.
Can he travel?
I think he's been released from house arrest.
In Romania, but he can travel in Romania.
Yeah.
Not abroad, right?
I don't know. But,
so he's not even an MP. He's got to become an MP first. And obviously he has lots of money to throw at this. But, you know, I mean, he's delusional, and he's just not, he's a classic example of a revert who hasn't got a good circle of friends. You are who you hang around, ultimately.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's got a good circle of friends, Muslim friends, who can advise him and tell him things he doesn't want to hear. I think probably he's got yes men around him, or quite frankly, non-Muslims around him, or Muslims who don't know about their Islam, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I think reverts generally, I always say that when you convert to Islam, you probably should withdraw from the public spotlight for a couple of years. Just go away, be humble, learn your deen, and then come back, and then you can be such a platform and a voice for Islam. But what he's done is he's trashing Islam. He's trashing Islam in public, and I fear that a lot of Muslims probably still follow him, right? And they probably still think he's great.
I think
all this masculinity stuff. And I think they'll listen to him. That's why I was always against Mehdi Hassan, even though Mehdi Hassan said great things. He was linking LGBT with Islam and giving the impression that it was okay, and lots of Muslims that think he's great would associate that fahisha with Islam. And Hamza Yusuf, the leader of Scotland as well, and Sadiq Khan, etc. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Andrew Tate and me are done. I mean, I was never his follower anyway. I was never into him, never watched his videos. I'm too old for that as well. You know, I'm a generation above him, you know, and we're not easily fooled by these guys. Whereas I think the younger generation, obviously they've known social media and TikTok and since they were born, really, and they'd get more influence.
The fact is, I mean, he's a total snowflake. He blocks all of his critics. I haven't seen him block Tommy Robinson ever, even though Tommy Robinson literally attacks Islam and attacks the Prophet, attacks the Quran, all these types of things. Look, I think Muslims, we bend over backwards constantly trying to defend the religion, even on the controversial stuff that Western secular virtue signaling woke people and Islamophobes don't like or attack us on. We will go out of our way to defend Islam in all aspects, because we love it. You know, that's our instinct. I instinctively want to defend the honor of Islam. It's just my go-to position because I love it. And
Muslims, not just Islam, and Muslims as well.
Muslims as well. But even then, like we all acknowledge that there are bad Muslims. And if there is any wrongdoing in the Ummah, we go after the Muslims who are doing the wrongdoing. You know, we acknowledge that. Everyone does. But we never acknowledge that there's anything wrong with Islam, because there isn't. It's a perfect religion. But Andrew Tate seems to be on reverse. He actually acknowledges that there's some kind of Islamic crime problem. I actually had it out with his brother, just by the way, on Twitter. His brother. Tristan. So I was criticizing Andrew on this, even though he's already blocked me. But Tristan responded and basically said, no, it's obvious from his tweet that he meant Muslims, not the religion. You're an
Islamic crime.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. And I just responded saying, look, you're what, am I supposed to be a mind reader then? I know exactly what it means, even though he writes something totally different. And I just said, look, if he can't be bothered to learn the English language then and write properly, then don't tweet about Islam. It's as simple as that. They didn't respond. But you know, I think we've got to address this now, because I think he's kind of like part of the Islamophobia industry in a way, pushing these right-wing, parroting these right-wing talking points about Islam.
I think he's linked to the UAE as well. That's where he converted. I think that's where maybe his advisors are as well. And the UAE is obviously trying to portray a very dodgy version of Islam to the world, a very westernized, liberalized version of Islam. We might get onto that a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to talk a bit more about the UAE, especially when it comes to Sudan. But before we finish up on British politics, there's one more sort of elephant in the room I think we've got to address. It's the workers' pie. Now, I've kind of been away from this a little bit, because I know you and Roshan have been dealing with criticism over Dilly's coverage of Syria, over the fall of Assad and Five Pillars kind of position on it. There's been a real split in the pro-Palestine community here over this. Assadists coming to the aid of this dictator who has now fallen and attacking the new administration in Syria. And then also it's kind of gone into weird realms where Sunnis are getting attacked a lot, and it's become quite sectarian. So it's become quite ugly by the looks of it. Do you want to just update us on where we're at the moment? I think
I think Dilly and I did a podcast, about a week and a half ago. I think we said everything we wanted to say there, but the nub of it is that the anti-imperialist left and elements of the resistance axis are clearly targeting 5 pillars. And spreading lies about us, and that we're on some kind of MI5, CIA, Mossad payroll. Disgusting lies and fabrications, which discredit them more than anybody else.
Absolutely. Anyone who knows us knows that that's just a joke.
I mean, it's just a stupid joke.
Stupid thing to say.
And of course, that's not coming from all the anti-imperialist left that we know, or all the resistance axis people who know. But what I can say is they're all staying silent about it. They know it's not true, and they're not defending our honor in public, which for me is just as bad. But anyway, moving on from that, because I watched the podcast that I did with Dilly, the last Blood Brothers podcast, if you want more details on that.
That's the context. So now the question is, we have a party, the Workers' Party, which is headed by George Galloway. Now, this is a party that relied very heavily on
solicits Muslim votes,
and has relied on them in the past, like in Rochdale and elsewhere. Some constituencies in Birmingham, they came close to winning in the general election because of the Muslim vote. These were Muslim-heavy areas. This party's leadership is pro-Assad. Many of its leaders are. Galloway himself has come out publicly in support of Assad many, many times. And now that Assad is finally gone, they still want to defend this issue, and they've done so, and they've attacked Syrian Sunni Muslims that are here in the UK. They've attacked the opposition. It's become quite nasty. So I think the question now is, where does the Workers' Party stand in
I mean, look, the Workers' Party say, I did read a statement they put out on their website. It said something like they support the Syrian state rather than any particular leader. But obviously they're sad that Assad has fallen. It's clear, right? Over the years, they've constantly said that they've demonized the rebels as being pro-Israel and pro-West and Takfiris, etc., and they've always been a party that has spoken out, or the leadership has spoken out in terms of Bashar al-Assad staying in place because of the wider implications, etc. So that will be their defense, I think. But I think it's clear now that Muslims have a decision to make about this party, because the vast majority of Muslims are happy that Bashar al-Assad is gone, and they would probably consider what George Galloway has to say and his deputy Peter Ford as whitewashing. Ultimately, Bashar is responsible for crimes that none of us would like to live under. He's a bad guy. He was a bad guy, and none of us would like to live under that regime. And we shouldn't expect anyone in the world to live under that regime. A minority regime, Israeli type human rights abuses on a bigger scale, quite frankly, than even Israel has committed. And from my perspective, and from the perspective, I think, of most Muslims that I know, George Galloway and Peter Ford are whitewashing that. They're completely whitewashing it. So I think Muslims involved as candidates in the Workers' Party now have a decision to make. I think it's quite an easy decision for Muslim voters to make. They're just not going to vote for the Workers' Party anymore, not under that leadership. A few kind of lefty Muslims, secular Muslims that, never seen a prayer mat, for example, might still vote for George Galloway and the Workers' Party. But I think in terms of getting a mass Muslim vote, like he did in Rochdale, like he did in other places, I think those days are over. So it's a very easy decision for voters to make. But now candidates themselves in that party have a decision to make. I think it's a pretty easy decision. I think you've been talking behind the scenes to some of them, and I think there are rumblings and a lot of discontent happening behind the scenes in the Workers' Party, but you'd know more about that than me, Robert.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll just play out two short clips, just to kind of show our audience what's being said and going on, which has caused a bit of a stir behind the scenes in the party. So Galloway, as a response to what's happened in Syria, basically said that the fight for the Arab cause was over and he washed his hands of it.
Yeah.
No, I will never give up. I have many other struggles to fight, and I'll go on fighting. But I feel that that part of my life, fighting for the Arabs, with the Arabs, behind the Arabs, alongside them, I feel that that period has now ended. First, the destruction of Iraq, then the destruction of Syria has changed everything for me.
So that comes from a video on YouTube titled "The Arab World is Dead to Me" or something like that. The Arab Cause is dead to me. There is another video of Peter Ford, who is a deputy leader at the party, a former British ambassador to Syria, so quite a known figure in left-wing circles.
Thing to do. It's the right thing to do with regard to the jihadi sympathizers who have until now constituted almost all of the refugees in this country, because people fled Syria. Why? Because they had been sympathizing with the opposition to Assad. That's why all these people are here. Now they've got their way. Assad, with our help, has been removed. They have no excuse to be in this country anymore, and they should be actively encouraged to leave. Yes, that's absolutely right. Many of the Syrians who have come here, they've been one of two categories. Either they have been sympathizers with the jihadis and therefore they got into the crosshairs of the Assad government, or they've been chancers, economic refugees pretending to be fleeing from Assad. All these people should be swept out. Without a doubt, there is no conceivable reason why they should continue to be here, where they have been, many of them, trying to engineer this outcome to get their jihadi patrons into power. Well, they've succeeded. And so they should be sent back.
You know, it's very easy saying to people, get out of the country. But often it's more complicated than that. You know, people might have people that, you know, relatives that are sick or elderly or something like that, or they might put down roots, their businesses might be here, etc., etc. But I think a lot of the Syrian refugees that have come to the Britain will actually go back.
Yeah, I know.
But demonizing them all as jihadis and all that kind of stuff is a bit too much.
That's something you'd hear from the Islamophobia industry. You know, that Muslims in this country are all jihadists and shouldn't be here. That's the kind of rhetoric that you hear from.
It's casting suspicion on a whole group of people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that type of tone has become quite popular in the Workers' Party, and it's believed. The people in there, including members of the leadership, believe that. So speaking to many people who have voted for the Workers' Party, speaking to some candidates who I met and spoke to, and I like these people, you know, I'm not going to mention them by name, but I grew to respect these people because they were doing what they were doing for Gaza. Do you know what I mean? So just like many independent candidates I met, I like these people. So we stayed in touch. There's definitely issues in the party over this. Obviously, as you say, Muslims in the Workers' Party feel very awkward and they don't like it at all. And I think the question that they're all asking themselves now is, can they represent the party ever again? Can they stand as a candidate for the party ever again?
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
No.
I think...
And they should come out and say it as well.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that... Galloway's happy to be an Assadist, had to have that branding, because obviously
he's got no issue with it.
Yeah, he's got no issue with it whatsoever. He's got his left-wing fan base as well.
That believe in that.
Yeah. He's got work elsewhere. So a day may come where he can walk away from the Workers' Party and, you know, there's no skin off his teeth or back or whatever, and he can just move on. But all the Muslims that are investing in this party, which has now got the same label as Galloway's and a Galloway Assadist political party, you have a reputation in your own community which you could now face damage over.
Yes.
And that community is going to be the one that you're going to want to work with going forward and be a part of. Many of the candidates who are still associated with the party, Muslim candidates, are under pressure from their family members, from people in their community who are saying, why are you still with this party, basically? And I think what's happening is some believe that the party is going to change, or that there'll be a change.
Not
of
under that leadership. No. Galloway's been consistent. He's very consistent on this, but has been for many years. Under his leadership, things won't change.
Yeah, and the fact is, during the genocide, we put things aside for Palestine, right? But now that the party is still insisting on fighting to defend the legacy of this brutal dictator that most Muslims hate, Muslims in the party need to think of their reputations now. There are good people in there who have good potential to do really good work in the future. I think if you're going to run again, you can't run as a Workers' Party candidate. You have to be an independent. And just stand with your community on this. Yeah. Because if you're going to alienate them, you've got no other job to go to. Galloway's got another show he can present. He's got his left-wing audience. The Workers' Party just can't. It's a pro-Assad political party now.
Muslims that stay in the Workers' Party will be judged by their community. Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
They're going to receive reputational damage.
They're going to receive massive reputational damage within their own communities, their own families, their own mosques, etc., etc. They need to get out. It's untenable. It's untenable. That's my position. I also think we don't need the Workers' Party. If you look at the parliamentarians that got in, none of them were from the Workers' Party. All right, Galloway won in Rochdale. Galloway won because he was George Galloway, has that personality, and obviously he had the backing of the Muslim community at that point. Then he lost subsequently, but by a small margin. But I don't think any of the other Workers' Party candidates got too close. Maybe Jody McIntyre did. I'm not sure.
No, he quite Jody close? McIntyre was really close. I think there might have been one or two others.
But he has his own. Jody has his own kind of constituency outside of the Workers' Party. He's a known person within his area, very respected, long-time activist, Muslim convert, etc. But what I would say is that the parliamentarians that got in, the five, were all independents, and I think that has to be our strategy. I think we have to not bother working with any parties anymore, non-Muslim parties. We have to look at maybe 4 years' time, kind of from now, even looking at candidates for 4 years' time, good candidates that we can back as independent candidates on the back of the Muslim vote.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and say, because obviously I think from a Workers' Party point of view, they'll turn around and say, oh, the independents, there's problems with them and you need a party structure and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, from a Muslim perspective, we need our independence, quite frankly. We do. We can't be associated to parties that have all these many problems.
One of the reasons why we did back the Workers' Party in certain areas in the last election is because there wasn't enough time to boost independent candidates. Yeah. Now we have time. We have 4 years. Yeah. So I personally think the Workers' Party should be dead to Muslims. We should forget about the Workers' Party. The leadership is problematic for Muslims. I'm someone who actually believes that Muslims shouldn't even be members or candidates for parties that have non-Muslim leadership. That's my own personal position. Others might disagree with me, but I think in terms of George Galloway and Peter Ford, they're not people that Muslims can follow. They cannot be our leaders, and I would say more for you if they are your leaders, quite frankly. Religiously, we just cannot follow someone who is defending, to a certain extent, a tyrant in Syria that has the blood of Muslims on his hand. That in itself is problematic. So we can't go down that route.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously we're going to wait and see how that goes, but we won't know for sure how bad the damage has been for the Workers' Party until the next elections.
When are they? Is there any local elections?
I think there is local elections and obviously a general election as well. The local elections will be telling, I think.
Well, all I can say is that as Five Pillars, this is going to be our position from now on, and we'll be campaigning against the Workers' Party wherever they are. They're not going to get any help for us whatsoever, and we're going to be actively campaigning against them.
Sure. Well, let's see how that goes. We do have a couple more stories before we end the show. There is a lot going on in Sudan, a country which is quite often neglected, I think, in world media. So we should discuss what's happening there. There have been some major gains by one of the warring sides.
The army, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about Sudan. Apologies to all our Sudanese viewers or people interested in Sudan, because I don't think we've done a very good job on Sudan because we've been focused on Gaza. So Sudan has been neglected. So this week, I don't think there are any good guys in Sudan, personally, but maybe one side is more preferable to the other. So we have the Sudanese National Army led by Abdel Fattah Burhan, who seems to be gaining the ascendancy over the UAE-backed opposition, the rebels, by Hemeti, who's basically he was an ex-general. They fell out. He's the richest man in Sudan, controls gold mines, etc. But it looks like the Sudanese army have momentum now. That's from my contacts in Sudan. That seems to be the preference of most Sudanese. Sudanese are happy because they don't want to see Hemeti win the war. But at the same time, there's no real good guys there. Hemeti is UAE backed as well. But I would encourage people to kind of there is an interview coming up, I think, by a friend of mine, Ahmed Caballo, who we're interviewing today on 5 Pillars, who's a Sudanese expert. We're going to put that on 5 Pillars later today or tomorrow. So I encourage you, brothers and sisters, to look out for that on our website, on Twitter and all our social media platforms.
Yes, we've got an expert coming on to fill that gap where we've left because of our focus on other issues. But obviously we pray for Sudan, and as we do many other countries, we wish them the
I've been
best.
to Sudan, a while back now, a good like maybe 13, 14 years ago. I only been to Khartoum, but it's such a hot country, so hot. It's unbelievably hot. It's like Gulf kind of hot. And but the people there, they're such beautiful people. Like I met so many people there, and from all different factions. And what came out of me is that they have Yemeni type beauty. You know, you'll know that because you have Yemeni connections. The people are so humble and so nice and so hospitable and welcoming. And the kind of hospitality that I've only experienced elsewhere in the Muslim world. I'm someone who's been to maybe 25 Muslim countries. I've only ever experienced that in Yemen and Sudan and in Gaza. Those are my 3 favorites.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable that they're tearing the country apart.
Yeah, I can believe
sad.
it.
So sad.
Yeah, I know it is. Often the most beautiful countries are the ones that are challenged the most. You know, there's something which I believe in it. It was I can't remember where I heard this from. Probably some lecture online, for example. But Allah obviously He doesn't punish. He challenges the ones He loves the most.
Yeah.
And in some cases, if He really loves you, He'll actually take you away from the dunya early. So you know, sometimes really beautiful people die young or whatever, you know, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because this dunya is a temporary existence and a challenge for us. So it's actually better in a way to go on to the next realm. But, you know, I don't want to butcher the words or anything, but that's kind of how I think of it, that sometimes these people are challenged harsher than us.
Allah tests the ones He loves the most. Yeah.
Allah tests the ones He loves the most.
Palestinians.
Yeah,
the Palestinians.
There is...
you know, there's one thing I would like to say about Palestine that I didn't say at the beginning as well, and that the Palestinians have passed the test, haven't they? It's us that have failed the test.
Yeah.
It's their supporters. It's the people that have done nothing, like you and me, really, and you know, just said words. But the Palestinians that have suffered, I mean, may Allah give them the highest ranks of Jannat al-Firdaus. The way they have suffered with dignity and not surrendered in the face of all that suffering, they have passed the test. It's us who failed the test.
Yeah, and subhanAllah, like even their suffering is like I don't even know how to describe it. It's like of benefit to humanity in a way.
It is
because, like, for example, people are being humbled by their suffering, and people are learning about Islam from their suffering, and it's bringing them to Islam and helping them. So it's really weird to say it like that, but in a way, they are just like role models in terms of how honorable they are.
They're winners.
It's really hard to
in
explain.
dunya, they may be the losers, but in the akhirah, which is what is important and what is everlasting, they're the winners.
Yeah,
it's us that are probably the losers in the akhirah.
100%. Okay, so this is the final story, which I think is important to discuss while we're back. It's about Aafia Siddiqui, who is, of course, it's a very prominent case of a Muslim sister who has been held for a very long time and has been tortured under US imprisonment. She's held in Guantanamo, right?
No. She's held in a jail in Texas. She was in Bagram, and then she was moved to America.
Moved to Texas. So this is a woman.
Very, very flimsy case against her.
Absolutely. We've actually had a video produced on the case, so it'll bring you up to speed if you're not already. I'll just play out a little clip of that now.
The worst case of individual injustice I have ever witnessed. These are the words of former US Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Why is the Muslim world so fixated on the abduction of one Muslim woman? The year is 2001, the September attacks, the war in Afghanistan, and the onset of the global war on terror. The FBI launches massive crackdowns on Muslims across the US, detaining and deporting many without charge. During this turbulent time, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, born and raised in Pakistan, was living in the US. She was a devout and studious woman, according to her fellow students, and active in her university's dawah scene, but never considered an extremist. In 2003, facing increasing pressure and harassment, she and her husband returned to Pakistan. Soon after, she was abducted, along with her 3 children, by Pakistan's military intelligence on baseless accusations of ties to the 9/11 hijackers. Aafia was handed over to the FBI. Her children's fate were equally harrowing. Her infant son, Soleiman, just 6 months old, went missing and is presumably dead. Her daughter, then 3, was sent to Afghanistan and placed with an American Christian family. Her eldest son, who was 6, was imprisoned in Kabul, threatened with death if he revealed his true identity. Aafia herself was held at Bagram prison in Afghanistan, known as the Guantanamo of the East, the prison outside of the US and outside of the law. With impunity, inmates were often tortured and abused. Despite no evidence linking her to terrorism, Aafia was later accused of attempting to kill a US officer, in which she was shot and critically wounded during the incident. She was sentenced to 86 years in prison on dubious charges.
So that's basically the background to it. Since there's been a real push to help this sister, there's a petition online. It's past 1 million signatures.
1.3 million now, at least.
1.3 million. And obviously, you know, her family have urged for a continuation of this momentum. I heard...
basically, it's to get President Biden, before he leaves office, to give her a presidential pardon.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've also heard, I'm not sure if this is true actually, is that there might be some negotiations going on among the Taliban to secure her release, maybe some kind of prisoner swap. I don't know if there's truth to that. These are rumors, I think. But
well, if the Taliban have any Americans, then they could do a prisoner swap with Aafia Siddiqui. But I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's something which I read, but I'm not sure if that's true.
I think that would be very popular if Iran have any Americans, or any hostile Muslim states, the Americans have any American prisoners. I think they would make themselves very popular if they did a prisoner swap with Aafia Siddiqui, because she is probably the most popular woman in the Muslim world in many ways. And I just made dua for her. I mean, the suffering that she's gone through, and may she be released very soon.
Yeah, it's insane, isn't it? Her entire life has been ruined in that way. How her kids, what happened to her kids as well, is disgusting. And I think there was a lot of emphasis put on like Julian Assange, for example, another case of injustice, of him being detained for as long as he was. But here's a Muslim that's been detained in an unjust case, and you just don't see it getting.
I think the Muslim world needs, if Biden doesn't pardon her, I'd be surprised if he does, quite frankly, because I just don't have any faith in Joe Biden. But I think the Muslim world needs to put focus on this woman and use whatever leverage it has with the Americans, and that could be a prisoner swap, or it could be something else. Let's get her back home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reunited with her family.
Well, we're approaching that time in the show where I wrap up and you interrupt. But
the only thing we didn't talk about was the UAE that I wanted to mention. I should have probably mentioned it with Andrew Tate, but I think, brothers and sisters, the UAE have recently put 8 British Muslim organizations on their worthless terror list, and 11 British Muslim individuals as well, and they say they're linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, etc. And the Muslim Brotherhood is a legal organization in this country. So even if they are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, that's no crime. I'm not sure if they are. I think some of them probably aren't. Who knows? But the fact is, the UAE is becoming the biggest internal challenge, I think, to the Muslim Ummah. I'm talking about I'm not external challenge. So Israel's an external challenge. America is an external challenge. But these are people that live in the house of Islam. They are part of the Ummah. And they are literally trying to change our religion. They are trying to foster upon the world a version of Islam which is devoid of Sharia, which is devoid of the most important aspects of Islam, to westernize Islam, to liberalize Islam, so that it's just a a hobby, like Christianity is for the Christians, you know, something they do on a Sunday or something that we do on a Friday, you know, to denude it of what it is and basically a complete way of life, you know. They're obviously normalizing with Israel. They've basically demonized the Palestinians with a vicious demonization. Some of their social media influencers on TikTok, you know, and on Twitter especially, they wouldn't be able to say without the things that they say, demonizing the Muslims, demonizing Islam, demonizing the Palestinians, if they didn't have the go-ahead from the authorities, because no one does anything in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. You know, they don't say a word without the go-ahead of the authorities. They wouldn't dare. They'd be in jail, you know. Not only that, so they've normalized with Israel. They've watered down Islam. They've made their cities and countries into bastions of consumerism and capitalism, you know, which is far away from the example of Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad. And far away from what the Quran and Islam teaches, quite frankly. So I see the UAE, because they have loads of money, oil money, they can propagate this lifestyle and this fahisha, this nonsense all around the world. They can pay people off. They can buy people. They can buy organizations. They can buy individuals. They can buy influencers. They can buy whole countries. That's why they are, to me, you know, and they are also the nation that is leading Saudi Arabia in many ways. Even though Saudi Arabia is a stronger country, in terms of what they're promoting and propagating, they're actually paving the way for Saudi Arabia, which is the home of the two holy mosques, to follow their degenerate behavior. And that's exactly what's happening in Saudi Arabia. The concerts, you know, Western singers, pop stars, you know, bikini parades outside swimming pools. You know, this is Saudi Arabia is literally following their lead. So, brothers and sisters, and Robert, I would say to you, I'll let you come in. I think we need to focus on this as an area. I think we need to boycott the United Arab Emirates. I think we shouldn't go there. We shouldn't live there. We shouldn't use Emirates as an airline. We should just avoid UAE, because this is literally, they're trying to destroy Islam, both religiously and politically. I don't know what your views are on that.
I just think it's such a shame, because obviously, you know, we think of Arabs historically, this part of the world, as being strong, principled, the heartland of Islam, basically, you know, and it's I think the ancestors of the Arabs, the Khalijis, would be like furious in their graves, basically, if they could, you know, react to what's become of them. You know, the Arab world is in a very bad state, and I think it's reflective of the terrible state that the Ummah is in, you know. But I just think that, you know, we're going down a direction where, again, like if you look at what's been prophesized about the end times and things like that, there's going to be few good Muslims and things like that. And I've heard quotes that suggest things like, it will be hard to practice Islam in the end times. You know, it'll be harder to remain a good Muslim than anything else, you know. So I feel like this is kind of meant to be
part of Allah's plan.
It's part of Allah's plan. Obviously, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it. Yes, we should condemn and be active. So I agree with you on that. But at the same time, I also feel like, you know, this proves Islam more in a way to us. But what we have to do is, like you say, engage in good dawah and protect Islam and keep spreading it, you know, and just work in dawah in our own personal capacity as best we can. Because that's the thing, like with their money, they're going to try and convince the world that Islam's like this.
Yeah.
But we have to...
They're not going to win. They're not going to win through the power of their argument, because their arguments are weak, or the power of their numbers, quite frankly. But they do have lots of oil and gas money, which they're going to throw at this. I just think I always think when I judge a person, I judge him on the company he keeps. And who are the UAE's best mates? Israel and the West. The leadership, I'm talking about the leadership of the UAE. They're literally, they think like Israel and the West. They're bosom buddies, you know, in the way they think.
And it's about,
and I think
about building...
that's what...
There's like mosques, you know, those multi-faith mosques. Have you heard about that? They're
building Hindu temples as well.
Yeah,
but that stuff.
I mean, again, can you imagine a Hindu temple being built on the Arabian Peninsula? I mean, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
Where are we going? But
also, you know, I would actually extend this to the resistance axis as well. I don't want to get back to the fitna over Syria, but if you look at the resistance axis or elements of it, they have more non-Muslim friends than Muslim friends, you know, or they look towards non-Muslims in a way for leadership in a way they don't look towards Muslims. That is problematic. You know, we are a ummah, we protect each other. You know, we prioritize each other. And yes, we think Islam is the best religion. Yes, we think that Muslims are living the best way of life. So when you're looking towards atheists for guidance or non-Muslim for guidance, that in itself is very, very problematic. I'm not saying we can't have allies from certain areas, but literally these people are leading them, you know? And
you said one thing once, excuse me. Sorry, I'm a bit sick, everyone. But just a final point from me. You once said to me, actually, that like interfaith, for example, is not like a concept we're necessarily against, but it has to be on our terms.
Yeah.
Okay. So the interfaith industry that's pushed in the UK is a source of evil because it's trying to normalize, right? It's on their terms. They're trying to creep Zionism and normalization into Muslim communities and normalize Israel. So we have to work against that. But interfaith as a concept is not a bad thing, but it has to be on our terms. Okay. Yeah. Like, it has to be of benefit to us. If not, then just don't bother with it. You know, let's just empower ourselves. We don't have to rub shoulders with all of these other people. We need to be strong ourselves, not relying on the strength of others to empower us, you know, because they never will ultimately. So I think the way you said it before, on our terms. On our terms. As long as it's a relationship that benefits us in any sphere or influence. Okay, if left-wingers working with them benefits us in our way on this front,
and they don't require us to water down our religion.
Exactly, and then we should ditch them when we don't need them. Yeah. You know, they shouldn't be the ones ditching us.
That's our red line ultimately. Even if it works against us, you know, our red line is that we cannot compromise our religion 1 inch.
Yeah.
And even if that means that we are put in a disadvantageous position and a bad position, then that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
Because these are our unchanging eternal principles.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we live and die by them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground on this episode. I think it's made up for the fact that we haven't been here for a couple of weeks, but don't worry, inshallah, we are going to be back on a weekly basis going forward. And of course, we have the holy month on the horizon to look forward to, where again, we'll be bombarding you with some fantastic content and coverage of all sorts of things during that month period, inshallah. So do keep an eye on 5 Pillars, and we will be keeping an eye on your comments as well. So do make sure you leave them in abundance, and inshallah we will react to them again in the next show, inshallah. So please like, share and subscribe. Helps the channel immensely. And until next time, it's Assalamu alaikum and ma salama for now.